In 2019, I got a promotion. I had been working at MedVet Cleveland West. It is a corporate veterinary agency. I started working there in 2006. I was an assistant. I went to school, got my degree, and then sat for the state boards and became a registered vet tech. I had worked there for about 10 years when MedVet acquired our organization, the Animal Emergency Clinic. Maybe a year after MedVet acquired the Animal Emergency Clinic, they opened a position for the administration. So the clinical managers did not receive the position the first time that they opened this position. But about 7 months went by. The first person that they hired ended up resigning. And then subsequently, I re-interviewed for the promotion and ended up getting it. So that was 2019. By that time, I had worked there for 11 years. The whole first year was very exciting. My hospital director, Kristen Wagner, was, amazing. Her and I got along really good. We shared a lot of similar visions and, we just worked really well together. And the team that I worked with at the time had a lot of tenure employees. Some of the people even that I was going to be managing were people that trained me. And we were like a family. I had very close relationships with these people. This year was like pretty smooth. I had a lot to learn. I didn't have any formal managerial experience, but MedVet was really good. Suzanne McGregor, who was at the time Vice President of Clinical Services, she was our interim hospital director before Kristen got hired. She was great. She was really good. She's a truth speaker. She's very clear. She set very clear expectations for me. She actually was the one who didn't hire me the first time for the position, but she took the time to give me the feedback that I needed, gave me goals to set, and then continued to mentor me with Kristen. So I was really excited about that, and just excited to get to lead the team that I grew up with, who have a voice inside of a larger vision like MedVet in the care of animals and animal advocacy, and then also getting to work a newer side of things through the administrative aspect and develop my skills as a leader was very cool to me. So then 2020 happened, and all of us know what happened in 2020. So the first part of the pandemic rush that we experienced wasn't too terrible. So it wasn't really the initial phase of that, but towards the end of 2020, I was very overwhelmed. At that time, I had just started to build out another department. I was the clinical manager for the emergency department, which was a 24/7 hospital. And then when COVID initially hit, we did experience a rush in volume that human emergencies were without like the government assistance of things, and had to navigate around the same challenges around staffing, around people getting sick, around the masks and distancing and all of that. And our hospital really wasn't designed, even though it was a pretty large hospital and it was a newer remodel, it wasn't designed for separation and all of that. And it is an emergency setting. And, vet techs in the emergency department, especially, you have to develop sort of an autopilot way in which you work. Most of the technicians that I worked alongside were extremely experienced, very well versed, and sort of sticklers to their strategic art of how they work too. So it required a lot of flexibility that sometimes can be a little bit of a challenge. We did get through it. It just was pretty challenging. I think every company experienced this a little bit, where there's a little bit of a taking advantage of the quarantine and being able to be sick and the testing policies and stuff like that. Well, then there was the other part of it. And this was personal to me. Time towards the end of 2020 that I really started to be able to appreciate how my core values had misaligned with this organization's core values. And that was around receiving the vaccine, sort of around masking and around some of the logistics a lot of people that can relate to this too, because some of the things just really didn't make sense. At the same time, I appreciated that I was a leader, head of these two departments. I still had upper management above me. So, and this, it's not my organization, it's a corporate organization. So my core values had to fall in line with what the corporation itself was setting in place as a standard and as a policy, and then to lead in that standard and that policy. So whatever policies they were putting in place around getting vaccinated, masking, disinfection, all of that, I had to, because that was my job to do so. But it didn't mean that there wasn't some internal resistance. Now, again, my leadership, Dr. Dustin Beauchamp was our medical director at that time, and Kristen and Suzanne, even our HR director, they were still very good in the fact of they weren't just ignoring me or anything like that. They were very open and really welcomed the feedback of all of the clinical managers. So it wasn't like it was an immediate shutdown or anything like that when I was well, this doesn't really make, how can I work around this? So there was that open dialogue and communication that I really could appreciate. However, when it came to vaccinating and stuff like that, that's when I started to feel a little bit of the more personal nature of things. I felt like sometimes it was sort of this personal belief sort of butting up against each other, and my autonomy and my sovereignty over my physical body was coming into question, and I felt like I almost had to be in defense of my physicality, my body. And that really put me into a lot of introspection about the role, but it definitely continued to create this quiet friction. It wasn't really loud or anything like that, but I don't know per se if that put a red flag on my chart somewhere. I don't know what the talk behind the scenes was with my upper management or my upper leadership, if their perception of me started to change at that time. I'm not sure. I've never been vaccinated, and I think I might have been one of the only employees of 100 plus that never got COVID, and I've still never had COVID to this day. And at the time was that, people that were getting COVID vaccines were still calling off and I was actually presenting with data around this too. I wasn't just making these claims and to defend my own personal position. Flexible to other people's opinions, even when it concerns myself. But at the same time, I also felt it was totally within my rights to protect my own personal sovereignty, my physical body, my physical health. And I felt like I had a pretty decent argument considering the fact that I really don't get sick and I practice physical wellness. Everybody knew that I am a pretty healthy person, healthy eater, and somebody who practiced physical wellness. But it was just a difficult thing to navigate. And that sort of bled into 2021. I also was having to work a ton. I was having to work administrative things from home, work all day long, and then have to do all of my scheduling, payroll, all of those things from my home. Sometimes I was taking meetings from home, so I would have my laptop open and be sitting there with my kids who then were on their phone or the iPad. I have two children, William, who is now 11, and Melina, who is 19. Kind of bleed over into my home life, that level of friction and kind of the turmoil and all of that. I needed to stay on top of it and just remained hopeful that once the whole pandemic thing had passed, that I would be able to be less stressed and things would get better sort of naturally. Also, in the background of my life, I was in the throes of a trauma bond with a pretty extreme narcissist. We had been dating off and on for about 3 years. His name is Ryan Zelenka. And we just had an extremely toxic relationship. He was extremely abusive, mentally and emotionally and physically. Although he'll still deny it to this day. It really doesn't matter. This isn't about criminalizing or villainizing anybody, actually. I just have to give these characters because the people who are involved in all of this don't want to take accountability, nor do they want to stop what they're doing. And I'm not going to lay down and die.